Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is a 2023 Toyota Supra GT. Now once you get past all the high IQ comedians coming up to you and saying, nice BMW, the next thing you normally hear are the amount of people that would have bought a Supra had there been a manual gearbox option available. Thing is though, for 2023, Toyota have heard that message loud and clear and they've given you such an option. So the $94,529 question is, does the inclusion of a manual gearbox all of a sudden make the Supra a car worth buying? Now before we get stuck into the stuff of internet wars, let's talk about one thing that I think we can all agree on. The fact that this is one stunning looking car. Honestly, I believe that this design could end up becoming as timeless as that of the Mazda FD generation RX-7. And the fact that the test car is painted in azure blue is a nice tie-in with that thought. Sporting a bonnet that stretches out into the distance and a sloping rear section, the Supra has a classic roadster profile. Above the rear wheels are a set of hips that Shakira could only dream of and need to be seen from directly behind to truly appreciate how curvaceous they really are. From the aggressive front end, double bubble roof, bulging rear haunches and integrated ducktail spoiler, everywhere you look there is something happening in the exterior design of the Supra. The only negative would have to be the spattering of fake vents found on the front fenders and along the doors. Now once you get over the large door sill and fall down into these beautiful leather seats, you're greeted by a steering wheel that's larger than life, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure why Toyota felt the need to put in a unit so large. I feel like the unit out of the GR86 would have felt much more at home than this, but that's what we have. Just beyond the wheel we have a crisp LCD display for our gauge cluster, although it should be noted, if you're driving along at sunset and you happen to have the sun directly behind you, then this will just turn matte reflective. It shows absolutely nothing, it completely disappears, which maybe when you're on track or just a nice Sunday drive might not be too annoying, but when you're driving around Sydney roads that are full of safety cameras, that can become quite annoying and make driving a bit more stressful than it needs to be. Now of course, sitting between my seat and the passenger seat is this center console, which is covered in nice glossy carbon fiber. And of course, taking pride of place is the 6-speed manual shifter. Of course, what we're talking about today. Above it, we have our dual zone climate control. We have our 8.8-inch infotainment screen, which has Apple CarPlay, thankfully. It also has a reversing camera. Just behind the shifter assembly here, we have two cup holders. Now, I feel like this must have just been done by an engineer and someone said, hey, we need cup holders. Okay, well, there they are. But using my scientific test bottle, which by the way my bladder is letting me know that is now empty, if I place this in the rear cup holder and I want to drive with any kind of gusto, not really helpful. Storage options, well, we have a small glove box up front. As I said, we have these two cup holders. We have a strange cubby just behind that. We do have a wireless phone charging tray up front and a USB-A port. We have a tiny little door bin which can fit half a pair of sunglasses. That's really about it in the cabin. It's quite surprising actually that, you know, considering how big the Supra feels out on the road, how little space you actually have and little storage you have inside the cabin. Now, that may not be an issue for anyone if you're buying this car. I think for me, coming from an MX-5, I was expecting to have a lot more space available to me considering how much bigger this feels than an MX-5, but like with a lot of things in life, it turns out I'm wrong. Boot space is another strange point. It's listed as 296 litres, yet it feels much less than that considering how small the aperture is in comparison to the size of the rear of the car. And now of course it's time to take the Supra out on the open road and see what it's all about. So we have the 3-litre, 6-cylinder turbocharged motor. It's making 285 kilowatts and 500 newton meters of torque. And as I've covered off a million times so far already, that power now gets sent to the rear wheels thanks to this 6-speed transmission. Now, coming into this week with the Supra, I was hoping that the manual transmission would really transform the car or kind of just really click and make sense to me. But the fact of the matter is, I'm going to guess that most Supra owners are going to be using these as GTs. They're either going to be just tooling around the city or they'll be taking it out for long trips, maybe interstate, etc. And I've got to be honest and say that the manual box just doesn't add anything to the experience for me. Now, before you come for me, it could just be because of this actual gearbox itself. like the engine, it is borrowed from BMW, but Toyota have apparently made some tweaks to their specifications, and it may just be the fact that this is such a new car. It's only got just over 1,200 kilometers on it, so maybe it still needs to be broken in, I'm not sure. But the thing is, the shifting action is so stiff, it's so notchy and rubbery that it's just not pleasant to use. And as we open up the taps a bit, in fairness, there's a lot of driveline backlash, and I thought originally maybe it's just me being a bit ham-fisted and not all that great of a driver, so I enlisted the help of a mate of mine who has real racing pedigree, and he agreed. You know, a few minutes behind the wheel, and even he was commenting just how much backlash there was. It's kind of like you feel the torque go from in the cabin through to the back of the car, hit the diff, and then make its way back into the cabin. It's not overly nice. In saying that, we do have rev matching, which is a kind of cool gimmick. Like, you know, sure, the pedals are placed nicely for heel and toe, but if you just can't be bothered doing it yourself, or maybe you don't quite have the skill, it's nice to know that it's there. And to be honest, it works really well. As an example, I'm now tooling along in 4th gear at around 80 kilometers an hour, and if I drop down to 3rd, matches beautifully. If I then want to go to 2nd, perfect. It's just nice, smooth, works brilliantly. Now, I should say that the engine is fantastic. Granted, it is extremely quiet. I mean, I'm in sports mode at the moment, and I don't think you heard that whatsoever. But the fact of the matter is, there is just torque on tap. Doesn't matter what revs you're doing, you put your foot down and it will move along. And that, once again, adds to its GT credentials, that highway driving is just a breeze, the car never feels laboured. You need to do a quick overtake and it'll do it no problem. Well, some of the strong points of the Supra, the suspension is brilliant. We're riding on 18-inch wheels, shod in Michelin Pilot Super Sport tyres. They feel extremely grippy. And the suspension, even though I'm in sports mode, really is doing a great job. It doesn't feel crashy, it doesn't feel overly busy, it's soaking up some pretty horrendous bumps really nicely. Because the Supra is an extremely wide car, I think I've nailed just about every single cat's eye out on the way out here, and once again, you really don't feel it all that much. The suspension and the tyre combo do a good job of ironing out any of those little imperfections in the road. Another strong suit of the Supra is the steering. Now, of course, it's an EPAS unit, so it's numb and you don't feel any feedback whatsoever. However, the car goes exactly where you want it, when you want it. So you can't really fault it for that. Yes, it'd be nice to have some communication and know what the front tyres are doing and where the limit of grip is, but at the end of the day, you do seem to get used to this car's characteristics and how to point the nose into a corner very, very quickly. Something that surprised me this week was just how much noise comes into the cabin. I've never driven on Pilot Super Sport tyres before, so I'm not sure if that's part of the reasoning, but there's just been so much noise that has come through to the cabin. Thankfully, the road that I'm on right now is just about billiard table perfect, so there isn't a lot coming in, but normal city streets, there is a lot of noise that will come through. Another element that's taken me by surprise is the wind buffeting. So I know it's a sports car, so you put the windows down, it's going to get airy, and I come from an MX-5, so I'm used to that life, but I found that the wind buffeting was just so uncomfortable that after my first hour with the car, it's been dual zone climate control only ever since, which is a little bit of a shame. Toyota says that the Supra will do the 0 to 100 sprint in 4.4 seconds. Whilst I think you'd have to be devoid of some mechanical sympathy to make that happen, I do have to say that the in-gear acceleration is exhilarating. You just put your foot down and away you go, and you look down and you can see some numbers which I don't think the boys in blue are going to be overly happy about. Thankfully, of course, we've got 4-pot brakes up front, which do a great job of wiping that speed off and bringing things down to a more sensible number quite quickly. To be honest with you, before I came out this morning, my mind was made up on the Supra. I thought it's a nice enough car, but it just didn't need a manual gearbox, and I'm a manual snob, so even coming to that realization myself was a bit surprising. However, now that I've been able to get out on the open road and actually stretch its legs, run through the gears, go through some twisties, all of a sudden I have a little bit of a different viewpoint. So I feel that it really does come down to what you're going to use your Supra for. If you're someone that's just going to drive around city streets, you're going to do the occasional long trip, you're really not going to be exploring the limits of performance. You're certainly not going to take it to the track or anything like that. To me, the manual just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add anything to the drive. However, if this is going to be your Sunday car, especially if you're going to take it to the track, then I think the manual all of a sudden makes a lot more sense. And I kind of had an epiphany that really what I should be feeling is gratitude. Mainly because Toyota heard the public, heard their screams for a manual option, and they've given them what they want. Because obviously Toyota, they want to make fun cars. Yes, they do the obligatory boring stuff and econo boxes, but they have to do that to survive, right? You look at what they're doing with the GR Yaris, the GR Corolla, and then you have a look at this, the Supra, where they released a product, the public said, no, there's one fatal flaw with it, you need to change this, and they listened. So what do you guys think? Is the Supra a car that you believe needs a manual? Has it solved a problem that you think Toyota had, or do you feel like the public has just shouted out and it's almost boy who cried wolf, that they said they wouldn't buy it because there was no manual option, but now that it's here, are they stumping up the mid $90,000 needed to buy one? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up, subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.